Buzz, Veera, in the midst of protests on campus over UGC's new equity regulations, Union Education Minister Pradhan today has stepped in with an assurance. The rules, he says, will not be misused and will protect all students. And this, he was responding to concerns raised by sections of general category students. Officials on the government have also hinted that they could possibly add a provision to ensure that complaints from general category students are also addressed, even as government stands by what it says is its core intent of the regulations to counter caste discrimination in higher education. Now, what is this controversy all about? The promotion of equity in higher education institutions regulations 2026. They were introduced after years of criticism, Veera, that universities have failed to deal with discrimination in any meaningful way, triggered by student suicides, adverse findings by parliamentary panels and repeated bias in hostels, classrooms and evaluations. These are the rules that expand the definition of discrimination, and they also include implicit, indirect and structural forms of discrimination. As a political journalist, what is your sense? Is this something that you've seen before?
That's right. Look, Vasudha, this is perhaps another reminder that caste is a present-day Indian reality and progressive measures will get its pushback. But what's really the question? How far can the pushback be? Because equity, given the kind of backdrop we've seen of discrimination in some universities, is an extraordinarily important task in our education systems, and sensitizing as well is an extremely important task. Perhaps these regulations and the debate around it will sensitize society further, but there are points, multiple points that have been made on either side. Let's listen into the political reactions before you head to the debate this evening.
किसी को उत्पीड़न होने नहीं दिया जाए, कोई भेदभाव नहीं होगा, कोई डिस्क्रिमिनेशन के नाम पे किसी को भी मिसयूज करने का अधिकार नहीं रहेगा। इसमें यूजीसी हो, भारत सरकार हो या राज्य सरकार हो, इसकी दायित्व रहेगी। मैं आश्वस्त करता हूँ, उसको जो व्यवस्था हुई है, भारत की कुछ भी व्यवस्था हो, संविधान की परिधि के अंदर होगा। और ये जो विषय आई है, ये तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट की निगरानी में व्यवस्था है। इसमें आश्वस्त मैं फील करना चाहता हूँ, कोई भी किसी के ऊपर भी अत्याचार या किसी को भी भेदभाव नहीं किया जाएगा।
सामान्य वर्ग इस समय बहुत ही खफा है, आपसे एक तरीके मानसिक रूप से अलग हो चुका है। देखा जाए तो केंद्र सरकार और राज्य सरकार दोनों अब अल्पमत में आ चुकी हैं। सामान्य वर्ग बिल्कुल अलग हो चुका है। अलग आज अगर चुनाव हो जाए तो केंद्र और राज्य में दोनों जगह यह सरकार नहीं बचेगी। जो बीजेपी का प्रारूप पहले जो था भारतीय जनता पार्टी, आज वो विदेशी जनता पार्टी है। मेरा तो ये आह्वान है कि आप केंद्र सरकार तुरंत इस यूजीसी रेगुलेशन को वापस ले, और जो उत्तर प्रदेश में जो ब्राह्मण विरोधी अभियान चल रहा है वो उसको भी तुरंत सरकार वापस ले, रोके।
ऐसी कोई बात नहीं हुई कि उनको बंधक बनाया गया या कोई ऐसी बात नहीं। मतलब बातचीत के लिए वो खुद ही गए थे और बात कर करके वो चले आए, और उनका व्यू था कि नहीं हम साहब रोल बैक नहीं। बात ये हुई थी कि भाई आपको अगर कोई प्रेशर है किसी भी तरह को बताइए, जाकर के सो लीजिए। अगर तो आपको मेंटली कोई दिक्कत आ रही है, 1-2 दिन टाइम ले लीजिए, छुट्टी चले जाइए। अगर आपको लगता है कि आपको कोई दिक्कत है, 2-4 दिन छुट्टी ले लीजिए। लेकिन वो उस बात के लिए तैयार नहीं हुए, और तो फिर उनको सौहार्दपूर्ण वातावरण में बात करके उनको वापस भेज दिया गया।
मैं नहीं जानता कौन है और ना ही मैंने कुछ सुना है इनके बारे में, लेकिन बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग होते हैं जिनकी चुनावी कीड़े जिनको काटने लगते हैं, राजनीति की बू आने लगती है जिनमें, तो एक बहाना तलाशते हैं।
कोई विरोध नहीं हो रहा है। वही लोग जो भेदभाव करते थे उनको परेशानी हो रही है कि वो भेदभाव नहीं कर पाएंगे। कब तक बहुजन समाज अपने पढ़े लिखे नौजवानों की बलि देता रहेगा, वो जातिवाद की बलि चढ़ती रहेंगे? ये बहुत बड़ा सवाल है। हमने रोहित को खोया, पायल तड़वी को खोया, कब तक? ये तो बहुत दिन पहले होना चाहिए था, देर से हुआ। मैं स्पष्ट रूप से कहना चाहता हूं, अगर किसी भी दबाव में सरकार ने 1 इंच भी पैर पीछे हटाने की कोशिश की, तो हम आगे किसी रोहित वेमुला की जान ना जाए, पायल तड़वी की, तो हम 85% कमजोर वर्ग के लोग, SC ST BC के लोग, हम लोग सड़कों पर उतर के इसका विरोध करेंगे। हम किसी कीमत पे अब अपने बच्चों को हायर एजुकेशन सेंटर में बढ़ने नहीं देंगे। ये बात मैं सरकार को बताना चाहता हूँ।
So the larger question that we asked today is, can Indian universities enforce stronger anti-discrimination safeguards without deepening mistrust on campuses? Joining us now, Abhijit Iyer Mitra. He's an author and also a defense analyst. We also have Naval Kishore, RJD spokesperson, and Suraj Yengde, author of Caste Matters. Thank you, all of you, for joining us on this broadcast. Abhijit, to you first. Just looking at some data, From 2019 to 2021, 98 students from Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi communities have died by suicide in Central University's top institutions. And this is according to the data that was provided to Rajya Sabha in 2023. Clearly calls for institutional safeguards when it comes to caste discrimination.
Absolutely. Nobody's arguing against institutional safeguards. The issue is the criminality, when it is found to be wrong. Nothing can be done against you, even if your accusations turn out to be wrong. We've seen this pattern repeatedly. There are two patterns that repeat out here. One is the debacle called the Defense Procurement Manual, which, they basically pretend that fixing this, we're going through the 9th iteration of the Defense Procurement Manual. Why? Because everybody in the Defense Ministry, nobody has the training to do any kind of procurement. So you substitute human incompetence with legislation. This is one thing that we're seeing out here. We don't have trained staff. Nobody is given proper training on how to deal sensitively with these issues. Nobody's taught how to identify these issues, go out proactively and sort them out. And so what do? You legislate for it. The second similar template that you see in India is the fact that how gynocentric laws have been abused to the point where 98% of the cases that are lodged against the man are found to be false. And not once is perjury then allowed to be pursued by the courts. The courts, in fact, proactively do not pursue perjury, even when the cases are found to be false. So you have a case where you played that little clip of Minister Dharmendra Pradhan. Yeah. Now, Minister Dharmendra Pradhan has never been a smart guy anyway, and this is one of his really spectacular examples. But anyway, in this particular case, tell me one law, Vasudha, that has ever been enacted in India that has not been misused and not been misused.
But Abhijit, some exceptional misuses cannot really stand in the way of justice, isn't it?
This is not exceptional misuse. Again, we're making the mistake of confusing human incapacity, third-rate training, no training at all. Third-rate training would still be better than no training for over-legislating. That is what you're seeing out here.
No, but when you try to reinforce a particular structure and deliver justice to those who have faced injustice without legal protection, Abhijit, there's bound to be a pushback. There's bound to be tilting over another period for a period of time before it comes back, before the balance is struck back again, isn't it?
There is no balance.
What's wrong with that?
With the gynocentric laws, how many men have committed suicide so far? When 98% of cases are found to be false, and you still can't push back and fix your gynocentric laws, where is the pushback?
But Abhijit, all of them...
We have to understand at our root, we are a third world country. Third world countries, the poverty is just the symptom. It is a lack of human capital. It is the overall third-ratedness of human capital that reflects across the board, including, unfortunately, in policy making.
Okay, Abhijit, point taken. But, as somebody who has studied in hostels, I do know that caste discrimination exists. And
yes,
it's painful. And I think that I do see this as reform. And I get your point that probably, maybe some nuances here and there need to be fixed. But overall, this seems like a reform to me. Suraj Yengde, what are your views?
I think, these are rules and they are proposed after, enormous investigation. We have to understand that Rohit Vemula happened in Modi's term 1. Smriti Irani was the HRD minister and she went on gung-ho about this. And the Bandatu Dattatreya, who was at the helms of the state and he was a minister, also was considered one of the accomplices in protecting the vice chancellor. So let's not really, make it as a political kind of pushback and stuff like that. That thing is there. Now, what we are really doing is we are comparing apples with oranges. The idea of caste discrimination is very prevalent. And not just at the government reports, we have seen this wide and about. And Vasudha, as you were saying, you yourself have been a witness to that. Anybody who goes to Indian institutions and stays at hostels or participates in a democratic class, you will notice how that hierarchy plays. Unless if you're, of course, far removed from that and go to one of those private posh boarding schools where these things are hush-hushed, then we really don't see this coming forth. The irony of the argument that's been proposed by people who oppose this is that this may
even
be
there it's a reality,
right?
Suraj?
Correct. I mean, since I've not been to posh private boarding schools, I may not have an ethnographic data to back that up, but I take your point, Veer. And the people, this is ironic and this is laughable, right? It happens also in America, where people who want to, fight against caste discrimination are being considered someone who are proposing to have more robust caste pro view, which doesn't make sense. And the people who want to oppose some of these views are saying potentially we may commit this kind of crimes or by mistake, because we are so seeped in and ingrained in practicing casteism that we are afraid that any act of this kind of cautiousness may work against us. And so the potential criminal is now making loud noise to say that I may be caught in my act of violence against people who needs protection. And the government has really come up with this kind of regulations. And part of the problem really comes across, it's not just BJP, right? It's also Congress. For example, Rohit Vemula Act has been proposed in Karnataka and Andhra. And both of the states are dragging their feet. So when people were making this kind of a BJP Congress, these both are sort of naked in their own actions to protect students from these communities for as long as it goes.
Right. Very quickly, a comment from Abhijit before I go to Naval Kishore. Abhijit, are we overreacting to this? Especially, is the general category overreacting to this?
No. Look, the problem here is you won't find general category after the initial Mandal Commission protest that happened when it was introduced under VP Singh. How many protests have you seen against reservation per se? You'll see cribbing on social media and things like that. The problem is this is taking it to another level. Remember, there were another set of provisions of the SC/ST Act, the capricious provisions of the SC/ST Act, which also the Supreme Court struck down, which this commission is now bringing in through the back door. The presumption of guilt, you can't do anything even if you're wrongly accused, etc., etc. Doing that when you're students is very, very dangerous. So trying to fulfill one set of orders from the Supreme Court, they are going against the directives of another set of orders from the Supreme Court.
Okay. Naval Kishore, so you're from the RJD and you've been speaking about the parties, both SAPA and RJD have been speaking about PDAs. This should make you happy, isn't it?
Look, it is under a pretext. If you look at the history of reservation also, as he has referred, when Mandal Commission was implemented, who were opposing? Even if the Mandal Commission came after recommendations of a committee, and when government implemented anti-Mandal reservation took place all over the country. So whenever there has been a talk of equality or equity, there has been protest from those who were beneficiary of this. So if you are talking to do away with discrimination, that is under a pretext. So you look at the data from 2019 to 2004, in 5 years, there has been an increase of 118% of discrimination in the campus.
But sir, that's more reporting, right? Here is the BJP risking losing its own electorate here. Yeah.
Vasudha.
Yes.
Vasudha, very briefly a point to Abhijit. Abhijit, you began by making this point about human incompetence and hence a legislative overreach. When we believe and understand that society has certain incompetencies in it, how do you then address that core issue? What is then the solution to ensuring, fine, I take your point that you cannot tilt the scales of justice against a general category person, but then how do you then ensure that cases like Rohit Vemula don't happen in our campuses?
Human capital building. It's very simple. I guess human capital building for the general population is a bit much, but maybe start with cabinet ministers at least, because they don't seem to be up to the job at any rate.
Okay. Suraj Yengde, my question to you is, a lot of people on social media have pointed out that this removal of this provision that basically has penalty for fake complaints is something that really worries them. Do you think there's something in the UGC rules that needs to be checked so that it becomes at least fair, or at least according to the protesters?
I think, we really have to come to this topic with certain amount of moral generosity. If we are not really, then we are really beckoning to a very negative kind of pessimistic overview of what we are looking at. We are really, the issue at hand is 118% rise of cases of caste discrimination have been reported. And this is a government data. non-government data, which you speak with fellow students, you felt slighted, you felt discriminated against, you don't even go and report, right? So there is much more to what we see. And when we are noticing this generous offer from the state to really say, let us counter this. And also, it's probably a step to experiment. And once that is experimented, like for example, the gender committees and across the board, right, provides that protection to women across campuses. Right. And for at all, we cannot just say, let's do away with it because, you know, there is a gender-based discrimination, there is a violence that takes.
Can I add something?
No, go ahead, Suraj. No, Suraj, my question to you is then that how do you then ensure... No, you know, you're making a strong point there. But Suraj, the point that Abhijit and others have been making and a pushback is that, you know, while sensitizing in terms of caste, how do you then prevent the abuse of it? A law cannot openly allow the possibility of abuse. And that's the question that's been raised. How strict
can I add?
Mr. Kishore, I'll just come back to let Suraj answer this, then I'll come to you.
No, I think you make a good point, and Abhijit does make as well. The overreach of legislation. For every act of incompetence, we cannot just pass another law because then again it will create a procedural difficulties and the malaise that follows with this legal procedures. We know that. But you have to understand the foundational principles of any criminal law is deterrence. It's to create that impact of discouragement from anybody to commit that. Right? So if deterrence is established as a premise, then people may not do it. Now we can go into the nitty-gritty of the details and how inadequate the policymakers are. But to go back to kind of Veer's point about how do we do this. So
that's a very important point. Abhijit, my question to both Abhijit and Naval Kishore, Abhijit, to you first. I mean, taking off from what Suraj said, the fact that, you know, there needs to be some moral generosity from the upper caste, given that studies have repeatedly indicated that it's the SC/ST students who face higher dropout rates, they remain underrepresented in several higher education institutions. Don't you think that is something that can basically allow this a chance?
Absolutely. And remember, people like me have been arguing even for reservation in the IAS and IFS where there is none, because we believe that there should be reservation out there. We are also completely supportive of the SC/ST Act, which criminalizes genuine discrimination against SC/STs, including name calling. And, you know, in that, I don't agree with Suraj somewhat on moral generosity when it comes to, you know, oh, we're indoctrinated into it. Therefore, when I use a slur, it should not be punished. It should be punished because that is where the deterrence aspect comes in. However, the issue here is an equivalence of deterrence. Deterrence against discrimination, but deterrence against concocting and false cases. Where this falls short is that this actually sets the law back 10, 15 years. It does deterrence one way. It actually incentivizes. It does not deter false cases.
You're basically saying a clause which makes the person who makes a false allegation equally punishable. If it's proven that it's a false allegation, the punishment should be as severe. Would that kind of a clause satisfy you as far as this is concerned?
So, Veera, the point here is we already have the legislation. You have the SC/ST Act, which has achieved equilibrium in the Supreme Court. You already have perjury laws. Tell me the last time any court took up perjury.
But we don't have anything specific to higher education institutions. Naval Kishore, you wanted to make a point, sir, then I come back to you. Naval Kishore.
Yes, I was just trying to make a point that in presence of a committee, that the SC/ST liaison officer, OBC liaison officer, committee to look at gender discrimination, in presence of these kind of things, there were rise of 118% in the last 5 years. So there is a need for this kind of a strong committee. And I don't know why Abhijit is so doubtful that every case that comes of discrimination is going to be a false complaint. You don't have to be so much doubtful that the discrimination which has been part of in presence of the principal or vice chancellor who has been undeserved category. So you look at the structure of the institution, that if it is handled at the helm by the undeserved person, and there is a committee of SC/ST commission, and therefore I think there is a clause that institution will be held responsible if there is a discrimination. So I don't think there has to be...
Abhijit, would you like to respond to that?
That's right.
Sure. Good point. Except we keep forgetting we're a third world country with very low institutional capability. This has always been the problem out here. Why do you think we oppose all these draconian no bail legislation? Why do you think we oppose WAPA in its absolute draconian, absolutism? This is a country where every law that can be
This
misused
is part of a committee report.
and large parts.
Let me get Suraj to respond to that point that Abhijit is making. Suraj, just respond to this. How do we reconcile virtually what Abhijit is saying is human rights vis-a-vis caste discrimination? How do we make sure that it's evenly balanced and poised when there is an institutional flaw in it?
But Veera, it's not been evenly balanced to start with, right? I think that is where, Suraj, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, also I think that's also kind of a good departing point. I think what I see, at least on this panel, is there is a sense of acknowledgement and a level playing field when it comes to protection of people who need protection. And I think nobody is denying that. I think it's just a procedural aspect of looking at it. And also what we are doing is we are comparing with a very nefarious kind of past examples that may not necessarily fit into this current condition. My approach to this will be very simple in the sense that we need to create that kind of fraternity, the brotherhood, the sisterhood that a society needs. And classroom, John Dewey had said, it's a very great democratic space for us to really rub shoulders against each other. A child of a domestic servant or a chauffeur and a child of a boss of that company. Like my father was a peon, but I went to a school who his manager's son was my classmate. Besides class, him and I never interacted with each other. But in class, we rubbed shoulders with each other. We played football and stuff. So classroom provides that space. But outside classroom, the acts that we see society is reflected. Inside classroom, there are certain mechanisms. But obviously, we are discriminating in the sense of what kind of food you eat in tiffin and stuff like that. So what we need to do to overcome this is really have a composite education, make a mandatory course for students who are coming from different kind of backgrounds to know about each other. Now, for general caste culture and their curriculum, we are exposed to that singularly through media, through culture, through the TVs and so forth. So we know what it is like, but rarely we know what is the life of an Adivasi community like.
Right.
We rarely don't know what a Dalit person lives like. Also goes with the backward classes people. So if we have that mandatory course to begin with, where students can then empathize and see the history, then I think there is a way to break this kind of a sharp, edgy ice.
So that's an important one. Abhijit, your closing remarks, sir. Abhijit?
Look, Suraj is absolutely right. This is a procedural issue, but we need to remember procedure is 9/10 of the law. And we've seen repeatedly in this country how procedure keeps getting abused over and over and over again. And our jurisprudence itself is too variable to ever be consistent. Remember, the law is the law when it is consistent in its application. The law shorn of consistency is tyranny. That is what we're looking at. There is too much leeway for tyranny out here. And invariably, if there is leeway for tyranny in a country like India, it will lead to tyranny.
Right. Naval Kishore, sir, your closing remarks.
I think if there is a situation, as Suraj pointed out, if there is, suppose I am from Sainik school, I did my school in Sainik school. Of the 7 years, we have never able to know that who is from which caste. And we did not have that kind of training. But similar experience is not there in the Delhi University, even in the top institution like Delhi University or where you don't feel that kind of, the moment you enter, you feel there is a caste-based inequality and there is a sense of despair. So I think if there are certain things which is there in the campus and it is noted in the campus itself, there has to be some kind of law, may not be that way, the way he is trying to understand or explain, but I think it is right, it is high time that the equality must be promoted and inequality must be done away with.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think there's any argument towards it, but how we're going to do it is really the question. It's a very complex debate, one nuanced. Remember, the wheels of justice, difficult to understand sometimes. Thanks very much, Abhijit, Suraj, and Mr. Naval Kishore. Vasudha, it is a debate that's that will
I just feel happy that, a lot of us, all of us are at least on the same page, Veera, when it comes to most of those issues. And I think that is quite an important learning. And like you rightly pointed out, there have been audits which have revealed many universities don't have functional equal opportunity cells. This probably could be a chance for universities to also look within themselves and have those systems in place.